Hi everyone, and welcome to a new edition of We Are Sunderland with myself, Scott Wilson, and Dom Shaw of the Northern Echo, as usual. Brought to you as ever without the help of our sponsors. That's the Fans Museum and also Cospex Opticians. If you're watching on the YouTube channel, then give us a like, subscribe, leave us a comment. It's great to hear from you. And the numbers are creeping up really nicely, so that's always good to see. If you're listening on the various podcast platforms that we're available on, then rate and review. Right, Dom, plenty to get at. We're going to talk about a certain game from the weekend. We'll kind of talk about where that leaves Sunderland. We'll have a look ahead, obviously, AFCON now and what the squad's looking like. We'll look ahead to Brighton. But there can only be one place to start. We were both there at the Stadium of Light at the weekend, Dom. We'll get to the nitty-gritty of the game in a sec, but in terms of the occasion, everything around it, everything that we kind of hoped it would be from a Sunderland point of view, did it live up to it for you? I think it did for me.
Yeah, I think it did. The atmosphere. I recorded videos like before and after the game, and I was watching them back on the night, and like beforehand, they sounded great. But then when you flick to afterwards, like the noise and the volume that had gone up, the scenes at full time were great from a Sunderland perspective, weren't they? And very forgettable game, but an unforgettable occasion, I think, for Sunderland, just because of everything that they've been through, obviously, over the course of the last however many years. The pain of the Derby defeat in January of last year, when that was a really humbling experience, I think, wasn't it? Because Sunderland were outplayed that day, deservedly beaten, could have no complaints. It was a reminder, wasn't it? I think on and off the pitch of just how far Sunderland have come in a relatively short space of time. We're talking less than 2 years there from the FA Cup defeat to Newcastle to Sunday's win. And it is a club. It's a team transformed, obviously. It's a club transformed, isn't it? Completely transformed.
Yeah, so let's get to that first, I guess, because, you know, we don't want to keep raking over what happened 2 years ago, but you know, the contrast is so stark. I mean, off the pitch, you know, anything that could have been shambolic 2 years ago was. We don't need to go into the nitty-gritty. We all know what we're talking about. This time around, I think the club deserves massive credit for the build-up to the derby, for the way that they made sure everyone got the derby, and then just the little touches on the day. I thought the Gary Rowell tribute beforehand, the Yellow Submarine was brilliant. Visitors, as opposed to Newcastle on the scoreboard. I mean, that's petty, peak derby pettiness, but it's what a derby should be. I mean, you know, this was Sunderland's home derby. They had to make that clear. 2 years ago, we all know that didn't happen. I think the club deserve a lot of credit, don't they, for all those little touches in and around it before we actually get to what happened in the game.
Well, I mean, they laid the red carpet out a couple of years ago, didn't they, with the Black Cats Bar shambles.
Yeah.
And the accusation, fairly, I think, given what went on, the accusation at that point was like, you don't know what this game means. You don't know what this derby means. Roll forward a couple of years, off the pitch, Sunderland transformed. Clearly, this is more than one man. Said it a few times. I think David Bruce has been brilliant since he's come in. Just for getting the right feel of things in the stands and all the things off the pitch, basically. Sunderland have done so much well, haven't they, off the pitch? But then on the pitch, I think in the summer when Sunderland was signing all these players, where I was sceptical was, we were told repeatedly last season that it was Sunderland's togetherness and unity that helped get them up. And I'm thinking, like, can you really maintain that when you're bringing in players with no connection with the club, coming from, you know, various ages, various stages of their careers? If Sunderland are going to be scrambling around at the bottom of the Premier League, are they going to be here for the right reasons? Are you going to be able to maintain that kind of feel of togetherness? Well, after the game on Sunday, I was down at, you did the managers, didn't you, which we'll get to. I was down in the mix zone and we spoke to Robin Roofs and Enzo Lefebvre, but then Bruno Guimaraes came out and he hammered Newcastle. And the first question that was put to him was, Why did it look like Sunderland wanted it more than Newcastle? Eddie Howe was asked the same question at his press conference yesterday. Well, then you take a step back and think, if you exclude Enzo Lafay, who obviously signed in January, so take Lafay out, 9 of the players in the starting 11 were summer signings, and yet the feeling was that Sunderland wanted it more than Newcastle. Like, that says so much for the recruitment, the characters and players who they brought in, just getting everything right, doesn't it? Because we hear clubs all the time, don't we, saying, we need to sign the right characters. But Sunderland have really done it, haven't they? They've really done it. They've obviously signed the right players. I mean, we can go through several, but they've signed the right characters as well, haven't they?
They have. They absolutely have. And the recruitment team deserve a hell of a lot of credit for that. Lebris deserves so much credit, though, as you say, for the way that he's held this together. Because I thought after the game, an awful lot's been made of the picture, which, again, peak derby pettiness, absolutely brilliant. But what stood out to me was, who were the players front and centre in amongst that? Who were the ones cajoling everyone to get that going? Dan Neil, Chris Rigg, Anthony Patterson, Eliza Mayenda, pulling players that had been playing to get in the picture and celebrate and couldn't have been happier. Now, I'm sure deep down, Chris Rigg and Dan Neil were absolutely gutted they weren't playing in that game. But you didn't see that. There's been no sulking. There's been no them and us, at least from the outside. That's the perception that you get. And I think that's one of the biggest successes as well, isn't it? The way that, like you say, this kind of completely disparate squad has been thrown together. Some players who were part of the promotion, others who've come in and weren't involved in it at all. And yet, it does feel like there's a real togetherness, a real squad ethic. Like you say, everything that was good about Sunderland in the Championship is still there now. And that takes some doing, like.
And on the subject of Lebris, I mean, how many times have we sat here and talked about him getting the big calls right? Just before kickoff, we both agreed, didn't we, in the press box, that we'd have started Trey Hume. It felt like the type of game where you want Hume in there. And yet, Mukiele, who plays right back, delivers the cross that's superbly executedly headed home by Nick Voldemar. When the teams came out, I was really surprised that Hume wasn't in, but it worked again, didn't it? Sunderland kept a clean sheet, didn't really give Newcastle a sniff, which I think was as much to do with Newcastle as it was Sunderland's excellent defending. And then Hume comes on and still gets his token crunching tackling on Derby Day tackling in the last minute when he smashed through Lewis Hall. But again, like that kind of ruthlessness we've talked about with Lebris, it's a big call to leave out someone like Hume for a game like that, isn't it? But he is not afraid to make those calls, is he?
Well, Regis Lebris made, I thought, 2 really big calls. One was that one. And it absolutely worked because Mukiele was superb against Anthony Gordon and against Harvey Barnes when he came on. The back four worked a treat for Sunderland. It also meant that they weren't overrunning midfield. They were able to compete with that Newcastle midfield, which felt like it was one of the strongest parts of their team. Robbie for Isidore was another big call. And again, I think that, there was a 20-minute spell in the second half when, Robbie wasn't creating a load of chances, but he was holding the ball up. He was giving Sunderland an outball. He was physical. He was putting himself. He was basically everything that Voldemar wasn't for Newcastle. Eddie Howe made 2 big calls. Anthony Elanga, I think we all know that turned into a disaster for Newcastle. Miley ahead of Joe Linton. I think Newcastle would have benefited from having Joe Linton in there as well. Yes, he might have got himself booked. He might have got himself sent off. But I think he would have given them a bit of fire in their bellies, which they just didn't seem to have. So in terms of, who won the head coach battle, absolutely hands down, it was Regis Lebris. Absolutely no doubt about that.
And you did have him as the manager of head coach of choice in your combined 11, which I noticed you got a little bit of, inevitably got a little bit of stick for in the comments last week. I mean, and the scenes at full time were great, weren't they, for Sunderland? They're the kind of scenes like Sheffield United and Coventry, and like it's moments like that make all the dross, and there's been a fair bit of dross over the last few years, worthwhile as a fan, isn't it?
Oh, I mean, from start to finish, the day could not really have gone any better at all from a fan perspective, could it? Like I say, I thought the tributes to Gary Rowell were lovely. I don't purport to know Gary Rowell very well. I've chatted with him a few times in various press rooms down the years, obviously when he was doing the radio and stuff. I think he'd have loved everything that went on before the game and clearly everything that went on during the game and afterwards.
That was so desperately sad on the eve of the game.
It really was. It really was. It kind of jolted everyone, I think.
Yeah.
But again, I thought the club handled that kind of really well. It could have been a very difficult, was a difficult situation. And then, just from that point onwards, the minute the game started, everything about it, the post-match scenes, as I say, the picture, everything, fantastic. Now, moving forward.
And Lebris was getting carried away in his post-match press conference, wasn't he? Full of colour and full of excitement.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, let's throw it forward a little bit because, all joking aside, Regis Lebris was the absolute picture of calmness after the game.
Yeah.
Great, fantastic for the fans.
But just sorry to put in, you could see with his celebrations during the game and at full time.
Yeah.
He composed himself by he came to speak to us, but he was enjoying it as much as anyone else, wasn't he, in red and white?
Definitely. But I thought what was interesting was when you went down to speak to Robin Roofs, even he was saying, look, this is fantastic. It's the best atmosphere I've ever played in. We're all buzzing. But effectively, he was saying, if this turns out to be the high point of our season, it'll be a bit disappointing. And I think that now is where Sunderland have to get to, isn't it? Yeah, it was a brilliant day. It'll never be forgotten. Nick Voltemada will be a derby hero for years to come. But, if we get to the end of the season and actually this now is the high point and everything else tails off a bit from now, it will be disappointing, won't it? Because the reality is Sunderland have got themselves into a position where, God, there could be so many more high points between now and the end of the season.
And we had the conversation, didn't we, on countless occasions early in the season, like, would you still take 17th? What's a success now? Well, Sunderland are not getting relegated this season. 17th, 16th, 15th would be a disappointment this season now, no doubt, because we know that this side is capable of so much more. So, Kirill Dreyfus said it, didn't he, on Monday Night Football a few weeks ago? Was it the Everton game when he spoke, before the Everton game? When he
went on Sky.
And he said about top 10, Sunderland have to be aiming for a top 10 finish.
Yeah.
I think Sunderland have to have an eye on Conference League. I think they can. I mean, we had the conversation when we came out. Can Sunderland finish above Newcastle this season?
Yes.
Well,
absolutely.
Well, Newcastle, I know Newcastle's priority, Eddie Howe won't say it, is probably getting towards cup competitions with the way their season's going. But Newcastle will still fancy themselves, I would think, to finish 6th, 7th, 8th. I think Sunderland have been a better team than Newcastle this season.
Yeah.
On the whole, Sunderland have been a better team than Newcastle this season. On the evidence of what we've seen so far this season, I think top 4 or 5 is out of reach, I think. Maybe top 6. 7th, 8th, I think that's very doable. Let's see how these next few weeks play out.
Yeah,
and we'll get in a little bit.
We'll get to that with AFCON,
But I think 7th, 8th, 9th is definitely doable for this Sunderland team.
Well, the reality is, I think, the way that the middle of the league is so congested, if you're talking about aiming to finish in the top 10, then the difference between 10th and 7th by the end of the season might just be a point.
Yeah.
If you're 9th, 10th going into the last month of the season, you're going to have a shot of Europe. I definitely think so. So I think we're undoubtedly at the stage now where we're saying Sunderland can realistically aim, I would argue realistically expect to be going into the last month of the season with a realistic shot of qualifying for Europe, which would be, off the scale from where we were at the start of the season. But I think they're pretty much there. Like, we're nearly halfway through the season. They've nearly played every team once. What is there for Sunderland to be fearful of?
Well, AFCON is probably the one answer, the one, because that's the one unknown. Certainly, I don't think they'll be fearful of it, but it's the one unknown, isn't it?
Yes.
How do you see the next few weeks
Yeah,
playing
so
out?
let's get into that. I mean,
we've done the team, haven't we? We go through that, but obviously Simona Dingra isn't going, so the 6 players Sunderland are going to be without. Sadiqi's a big miss. Diarra, even though he hasn't been playing, is a big miss. And I mean, Talby and Traore both started the game on Sunday. You could argue that they're Labrisse's first choice wide players. They're going to be a big miss as well, aren't they?
And Ronaldo, obviously.
And Ronaldo, obviously, yeah. Well, I think, he's going to be a huge miss because he was playing, wasn't he?
My view on it, and you know, listen, what team is Sunderland going to play against Brighton at the weekend? We're a bit out from it yet. We're recording this on Wednesday morning, but it's going to be Roos in goal. I would imagine it'll be Mukiele at right back. Hume will play at left back. This is assuming it's a back 4. Ballard and Alderete as your centre halves. That then allows you to play Gertruda in midfield if you want to. And I think that will be an option in this next month. So potentially you're looking at maybe Gertruda, Xhaka, Rig. And then maybe you're looking at Lefay, Adingra, Brobby/Isidore. I don't think that's a bad team. I don't think you're a million miles off there, what Sunderland have been playing. Your centre midfield is where you've been significantly weakened, I think, because taking Sadiqi out, how will that affect what Xhaka is able to do? I think that is a big, big question. My feeling with Sunderland on AFCON is that the 11 that they're going to be putting out at the minute is not too bad at all. My worry would be if you get suspensions and injuries on top of that in the next month. Because what have you got below that? You've got Dan Neil, you've got Mayenda, you've got Sirkin kind of coming back, but we don't know where he's at. You've got Mundell, who's kind of been in and around it, but hasn't played a lot of football. There's 2 or 3 areas on the pitch: centre mid, centre back, full backs, where if you get another injury, you're probably in square peg in round hole territory, aren't you? You're probably having to fiddle around and make it kind of work. Clearly, what you absolutely want to avoid is an injury to a Xhaka or a Ballard, who feel like, you know, really, really big players during this AFCON period. So I think a lot of it's going to come down to a little bit of luck along the way. Can Sunderland keep players fit? Can they keep a little bit of momentum going? And then I think they can scramble through this AFCON period. Like I say, my worry would be injuries in key areas could be really damaging because, there's no doubt that the squad is now pretty much stretched to its limits.
Labrisse said last week that Sirkin's ready and available. But I agree with you. He's not going to put him straight in at left back, is he? It's going to be Hume. Because if he does, it's going to probably mean Hume's having to be on the bench. Well, he's not going to select Sirkin over Hume.
I think we're into the Christmas week. There's obviously what we got. Game on Saturday. Then actually, you've then got a full week, haven't you? Mm-hmm. But then you're going, Sunday, Thursday, Sunday. So it's probably that week, isn't it? Where I suspect there's a chance Sirkin will start a game. But then, I say you're only talking 4 games in a fortnight. Then admittedly, you've got another midweek after that, then the FA Cup. So forget the FA Cup, because I think that will be a whatever team you can get out, then fine. But you're talking 5 games in 2.5 weeks in the Premier League. Do you have to make changes amongst that? Possibly. Again, it'll come down to who can stay fit. You know what I mean?
I think the other thing as well is when you take a step back, Sirkin's an England under-21 international who has been linked with countless Premier League clubs over the course of we're going to have to get some clarity on the contract situation, I think, aren't we, in the next month or so, really, because that's going to dictate January, you would think. Chris Rigg is, Sunderland's record breaker, who was wanted by just about everyone in the summer. Romain Mundell was one of the best players last season when he was fit. And Dan Neil was the captain last year. So I think when you take a step back, it's the quality there. The worry is the lack of football for them, obviously. But then on the flip side of that, how hungry will a Dan Neil be if he gets his chance? How desperate will he be to take that chance? The same for Mundell, the same for Sirkin, the same for Rigg, obviously. So I think that evens itself out, really. I hope Neil gets a chance. I hope Neil gets an opportunity to get some
games. I do, and I think he will. I think there will be a game where Neil plays. I'm not saying it'll be Saturday. I'm not sure it will be, but I think there will be a game where Dan Neil starts. And I think the other good thing from a Sunderland point of view is these players are coming in from a position of strength where everything's been going great. There's really positive momentum. What's not happening is they're coming into the side having not played very much football, with the team struggling in 18th position, can't buy a win, load of pressure mounting, fans a bit unhappy, loads of questions over Labris, blah, blah, blah. Well, there's absolutely none of that. If you picked a situation where you're going to put in a couple of players who haven't played much football, then this would absolutely be it. So, yeah, I definitely don't think Sunderland are going to suddenly fall off a cliff or anything like that. As I say, my only worry is couple of injuries could really do a bit of damage in the next month.
And Dan Ballard, we mentioned Ballard there. Let's talk Ballard, because when I said there about the players there was 9 players, 10 if you count Lefebvre, because obviously he was a permanent sign in the summer. But Ballard was the only starter who has been a long-term Sunderland figure, really. It's easy to forget, isn't it, that it's his first Premier League season. He has been immense, and he was again on Sunday, wasn't he?
Yeah, and it's easy to forget just how kind of difficult a time at times he's had it with Sunderland just through injury. He's always looked an absolutely class player, hasn't he? He's always looked, the ability's always been there. It's been so stop-start for him. Even last season when he had those massive highlights towards the end, he actually didn't play a lot of football up until about the final month of the season. He just couldn't get fit. They couldn't keep him fit. So, what's been great for Dan Ballard is that he's had this couple of months now where he's been fit. He's been able to play 90 minutes every time Sunderland have needed him. And because of that, he's been able to show just what a good player he is. And, at the minute, he's looking in both boxes pretty much as good a centre-half as there is anywhere in the Premier League. I genuinely would say he's right up there looking that good. Again, completely dominated Volta physically at the weekend. He's such a strong, imposing player. But then he's also really calm on the ball. He can step out if you need him to. Like I say, he's a threat at the other. He is the all-round centre-half now. He's stepped up so well. But like I say, I think that's always been there. It's just he's been able to stay fit.
Will Tommy Watson be regretting his move to Brighton?
Yeah,
it's obviously Brighton next. Well, it's Brighton next for Sunderland on Saturday. Obviously, Scott's braving the Friday trouble. I think you should set off now.
What a weekend! Listen, I'm always mindful that when we make this kind of comment, we're getting paid to do it. So fair, any fan, all fans who are heading down this weekend, absolutely massive respect.
Yeah.
But I mean, whether it's trains, whether it's driving, however you're doing it, the weekend before Christmas, nice little jaunt down to Brighton. Come on, I'll see you there at the Amex. Yes, so Tommy Watson.
He's played 40 minutes in the Premier League so far this season. Two substitute appearances. One Man United, the defeat of Man United. He got 31 minutes there, and then 9 minutes off the bench in the game against Leeds. He's played in the Carabao Cup. Now he's 19, and the chances are he would have been similarly used at Sunderland. I think he'd have probably played more than that.
I think he'd have played more.
I think he'd have played a lot more than that. But I don't think he'd have been a starter. Or maybe I'm.
No, I don't think he'd have been a starter at the start of the season.
But he'd have played more than 40 minutes.
But I think we've all kind of agreed that, they haven't underperformed in any way, shape or form. But Traore, Talby, Adingra, none of them have been undroppable, have they? I think there would have been points at the season where Tommy Watson would have been coming on as a sub, might even have started an odd game. And if he'd played really well, Labris might have stuck with him. And then you just don't know where you can get to then. All of a sudden, play really well for 3 games in a row, you might be in for the next dozen. I think he would have had a chance if he'd been at Sunderland this season. Whether he would have taken, there's every chance that he would have been in that pot with Mundle, Adingra, Talby, Traore, where, to at least some degree. You're never quite sure who Lebris is going to be going with. Although obviously Talby and Traore have had way more minutes than the other two. I think you would have had more of a chance had he stayed at Sunderland. So is he regretting it? I think that's really interesting. As a local lad, as someone who was part of everything that happened last season, there must be a little bit of him that looks at it and thinking, should I have been a part of that? Should I have stayed? I mean, listen, he's on more money at Brighton. He's very young. I'm sure that he's being told by Hertzler, you'll get your chance. Don't be patient. I've got a plan for you. We don't know what's being said behind the scenes, but I struggle to think that he isn't at least looking at it to a slight degree and thinking, look at what's going on up there at Sunderland.
You asked Lebris a couple of weeks ago at the presser, didn't you? I think it was before the Bournemouth game, about the importance of being good sellers as well as being good buyers. And like you look at someone like Jack Clark, who's like not playing for Ipswich week in, week out now. Yeah. I mean, they've got a deep squad by Championship standards, and he plays a lot of football, but he's not necessarily a nailed-on starter every week. But like at the time when you thought losing Clark, losing Bellingham, losing Watson, Ross Stewart.
Yeah.
We haven't had the conversation down the line with any of those players, like, if only Sunderland had kept X, or if only Sunderland had kept Y. That is a transfer model working, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think part of that is because of the quality of the players who've been brought in to replace them.
That's our model. If that is telling them you need to get the next one.
Absolutely is. But had Sunderland, instead of signing Siddiqui and Diarra, had Sunderland signed two centre midfielders who flopped and just didn't look up to it, then we probably would be having the conversation. Why? What would Joe Bellingham be doing in that? I know what Jude Bellingham be doing. What would Joe Bellingham be doing in that team? Should Sunderland have held on to him? Had Talby, Traore, players like that not come in, then maybe there would have been could they have done with Tommy Watson in that team? We're not having those conversations because the players that have brought in have been a step up. Let's not beat about the bush. They've improved Sunderland. So, like you say, that is how any ideal transfer model should work. Sell at the right time, get money in, reinvest that money in players who make you better. And that's what Sunderland have done. Now, is there a point further down the line where they have to sell again? Well, there's plenty of players in this squad that if they have a second half of the season like they've had a first, Siddiqui, Mukiele, there's two just straight away off the top of my head.
Well, Sunderland paid 15 million for Siddiqui. Man United and Chelsea were both linked last week, which was very quickly dismissed by Lebris. But how much would he be worth now?
There you go. I mean,
more than 3 times that, wouldn't he?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I would have said
21 years old.
Absolutely.
You're looking at 50 million quid, aren't you? But as a start.
Well, if you look at the prices that what Brighton sold Caicedo, what was that, 100 and something? Like, I know no two situations are ever like for like, but yeah, Noah Siddiqui at the minute at his age looks every inch of £50 million plus footballer. I know Mukiele's that older, but I still think there'd be an absolute clamour for him if he carries on and has the second half of the season like he's had the first. So that's good. That's going to be interesting. We're a fair bit off down the line down there, but obviously Sunderland, spent massively in the summer. They had the scope to be able to do that PSI wise. They're not going to have the scope to be able to do that every summer moving forward. If they want anywhere near that level of expenditure in future windows, then they're either going to have to grow their income massively, which the club are doing, and I suspect when the next accounts come out, there'll be a massive success there. But that is that doesn't happen overnight. Sunderland are not going to be making Man City levels of income in the next couple of seasons. That's just not the way it works. So what's the way that you bring money in? Well, it's player trading. So I think that, that will always have to be a part of the model. And it works as long as you're doing what Sunderland are doing at the minute, which is reinvest the money and improve off the back of it.
You want to follow up the Derby win with a result now, though, when you're at Brighton. If you go to get a Brighton, I think even great draw. I think if you get a point at Brighton, that's
yeah, I agree. I mean,
it just keeps it building, doesn't it?
Brighton are one of those clusters of clubs in the Premier League at the minute that feel like they're really hard to predict. They're up and down, undoubtedly stronger at home than they are away from home, but can be great one week and then can not really turn up the next. So it's certainly not a game Sunderland, even an AFCON player less Sunderland should be fearful of or anything like that. But I agree with you. Off the back of the derby, if you can go there, get a point, and then all of a sudden you're back at home to Leeds, I think that's a great result, and it just sets you up really, really nicely to head into Boxing. Well, it's not actually Boxing Day, is it? But you know what I mean. The post Christmas and into New Year and that kind of flurry of fixtures. I think it's a hard one to call, to be perfectly honest. Like
I think Brighton are a hard team to call.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. Sunderland have not failed to turn up really at all this season, other than probably Fulham. And this game has a little bit of a feeling like Fulham away. I'd put Brighton in the same group as Fulham, where on their day they can turn up and be an incredibly hard team to beat on their own patch in particular. There's other days when they're eminently beatable. So to a degree, I think it'll depend on what Brighton turn up. And then obviously it'll depend a bit on what team Labris actually does put out and how the new faces and the reshuffling that's in there actually works out. So because of all of that uncertainty, if you like, because of all of that change that there's going to be from a Sunderland perspective, I think a draw would be a good result for Sunderland.
Well, safe travels if you're heading down. Look after yourself, and fair play to you, as I said, because that is a monumental effort. A few days before Christmas, hopefully you'll get the reward in terms of points or results, 3 or 1, and then we bounce into the Christmas period. Thanks very much for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks, as Scott said at the start, to our partners, the Fans Museum and Cospex Opticians. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching on YouTube, you probably will have seen our latest offer. Subscription offer is running across the bottom of the screen there. That's just £6 for 6 months, or £26, which will take you through to the start of 2027. And it promises to be an exciting 2026. So sign up and take advantage of that offer now. If you're listening on podcast platforms, then I'll drop that link to that offer in the show notes. So you can take advantage there if you want. Any support there is massively appreciated. Enjoy the weekend. Safe travels, as we said, if you're heading down, and we'll be back next week for We Are Sunderland. Take care.